Good morning. The delegates are ready. You are welcome to start your presentation.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We're just muting on this side because of the group size. So we won't, if we need to address you, we will come closer, but you are quite clear. You are welcome to commence. Thank you.
Thank you. So, good morning from Cabo Verde. And I'm happy to say good morning from Cabo Verde because we have been just selected for the World Cup for the first time. So let me say it again, good morning from Cabo Verde and good afternoon in Pretoria. All protocols observed, Excellency and colleagues. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with this UNDP project and with my colleague, Ricardo. We have been meeting in this type of events. So I will deliver my closing remarks with your permission. Let me begin with a challenging question. Have we perhaps been framing women in leadership and gender parity too narrowly? Is a question. My arguments that I will try to present in these remarks transcends the gender equality as fairness narrative. And the idea is to start working on a new gender equality narrative that anchors in power, governance, and macroeconomics. Understanding macroeconomics as the allocation of assets to serve established power structures. So this is just to provide the conceptual perimeter of what I'm going to present, and I have been presenting in the past, I would say, 5 to 6 years. Gender parity is, of course, a human right. But if we confine it only to that realm, we risk falling into a silent trap, the trap of the mercantilization of human rights. What I mean by that? In a system where moral imperatives are often replaced by measurable indicators, rights can be easily become a currency. When gender equality, applying to gender equality, when gender equality becomes something to trade or quantify, its transformative power is lost. Parity becomes a box to tick rather than a lever to transform. This is why women in leadership, in my opinion, must go beyond parity as a human right and reclaim it as a tool of transformation, one that shifts the balance of power and redefines the very structures that perpetuate exclusion. Let me use one example: violence against women and girls. Allow me to use in this conversation an example on violence against women and girls. So to make clear what I'm trying to present here, we too often treat it as a crime to be punished or a rights violation to be condemned. It is both of these things. It's a crime to be punished and is a violation of a right. But it is also much more than that. I have been advocating in a strong way that violence is a structural issue rooted in power. It is the other side of the coin of exclusion. Women experience violence not only because perpetrators act with impunity, but because women are denied a seat at the table, because women do not set the rules of the game, because women remain disempowered. So disempowerment is the antechamber to violence, where power is absence, vulnerability thrives, where voice is silence, violence finds legitimacy. So in this example, ending violence, therefore, requires far more than criminalizing acts or protecting victims. It requires shifting the balance of power. This means, in the same example, this means providing women with access to tangible assets, such as land and finance, as well as intangible assets, including STEM education and digital skills. And these are the foundations of autonomy. This transition from dependence to ownership, from vulnerability to voice, is what truly breaks the cycle of violence. So yes, we need power to end violence. We need power to change the rules of the game. So we women in leadership, we seek power with a purpose. We seek power with a purpose. Therefore, the crucial question in this conversation about women in leadership is power for what? Power for what? We fight to be leaders, but for what purpose? Of course, not to fill the quotas. These are only indicators and often narrow ones. We seek power with a purpose, leadership anchored in values and principles. In my case, and I believe in all the women in this conversation, we want power not to dominate, but to transform. The neoliberal theory equates power to domination. I believe that this is not our pitch when we women seek power and seek to be in leadership positions. So we want power to end all forms of inequality. In my case, I want power to protect the earth. I want power to bring electricity to the 600 million people, Africans, who still live in the dark. I want power to bring the 100 million children out of school back in glass rooms in Africa. So we want power to make things better, not for women only, but for everyone, for everyone. So empowering women, therefore, is not just a moral imperative or a self-sufficient ambition. So it is an economic and political necessity. For too long, gender equality has been confined to the realm of social policy. If you screen most of the public policies on gender parity in Africa, the issue, the challenge of gender parity has been parked on the social side of the house, always. Detached from the decisions from financing and planning ministers. This has been a mistake. In my view, gender inequality is a macroeconomic issue, allocation of assets, as I mentioned above, with measurable costs to national development. So macroeconomic policies that ignore gender perpetuate exclusion and make inequality a structural feature of economies. So by recognizing women's empowerment as a macroeconomic stability tool, we reframe completely the conversation. So gender equality, as everybody knows, fosters productivity, diversifies economies, enhances resilience. And this is the magic word. It transforms societies from within by redistributing, again, resources, and consequently, by redistributing power. Because in the end, women in leadership is not only a conversation about fairness, it is a conversation about power, systems, and sustainability. So going back to my example, to end violence, we must dismantle the systems that normalize this empowerment. To achieve equality, we must re-engineering the institutions that reproduce exclusion. This brings us naturally to the heart of the 2030 agenda, the SDG 5 and the link between SDG 5 and SDG 16. Development is institutional driven. There is no other type of development. Development is institutional driven. No institutions, no sustainable financing. No sustainable financing, no sustainable development. And without sustainable development, there can be no peace or stability. This is why women in leadership, as you, in institutions of accountability, such as the Supreme Audit Institutions, finance ministers, and oversight bodies, is indispensable. You sit at the very heart of what I call the sustainable financing value chain, and in a power position to redesign the balance of power within that value chain. Let me give you a sense of what is at stake from an African standpoint. Africa loses on an annual basis $70 billion in efficient public spending. Africa loses $89 billion in illicit financial flow. Africa loses $46 billion in efficient tax expansions. When we close our COB today, Africa will have lost only today $1.46 billion. Annually is around $500 billion. Africa is, in fact, a net creditor to the world. It borrows its own money, pays interest on it, and finds itself managing poverty rather than development. Women in leadership in supreme audit institutions can help break this paradox. By building strong systems of accountability, transparency, and supervision, we can change the paradigm of Africa's financing for development. What I mean by that? Today, Africa's financing for development is driven by an ODA-dependent mindset. We need to move it to a financing for the development business model driven by domestic resource mobilization. This new paradigm, African countries through ownership will control their economic and financial flows, create fiscal space, generate predictable cash flows, reshape their country risk profile to tap international markets from a position of strength. So keeping Africa an asset in Africa, and you are in a position in the sustainable financing value chain to play a critical role, is a precondition for rebalancing asset allocation within Africa and consequently power. So this is the reason I believe we should fight for gender parity in leadership positions, not just to make things equal, but to make them different, to make them better for all men and women alike. This is how I see women in leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Chega mais pertinho. Muito obrigada, doutora Cristina.
Obrigada pelo convite.
Um excelente encerramento nós tivemos e elevando a questão da liderança feminina para uma visão mais estratégica e macroeconômica. Obrigada por nos trazer mais um insight para que as nossas delegadas possam voltar para os seus países ainda mais inspiradas e certas do seu papel na mudança e na transformação enquanto líderes nas instituições superiores de controle. Agradeço muito, agradeço ao Pro PALOP pela indicação, Ricardo Godinho, e agradeço também à AFROSAI pela parceria para que a gente pudesse completar com sucesso esse programa. Muito obrigada.
Obrigada.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cristina, for your closing remarks and for bringing digital lenses into macroeconomy and for equipping our delegates with such knowledge. We also thank you and acknowledge your role in control and supervisory entities. We thank you very much.
Can I disconnect?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Now we're going to have our special lunch, yeah, and we are done with ProInter, the third edition.